Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Post Up with David Grubb here on Boot Crew Media. I am, of course, David Grubb. Thank you for joining me. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and make the Post Up your stop for Pelicans news and analysis each and every day. We're going to start today's episode with some fresh news from the Pelicans front office. The team is reportedly hiring Jason Hervey, adding another piece to their evolving organizational puzzle. Hervey spent the last 4 seasons as an advanced scout with the Portland Trail Blazers, where he was responsible for breaking down opponents and helping shape their game plans. But his NBA experience is a little bit further than that, goes back a bit further than that. He's worked in various roles for several teams over the last several years, including the Detroit Pistons, Minnesota Timberwolves, Phoenix Suns, and of course, the Portland Trail Blazers. Hervey does have a long-standing professional relationship with Joe Dumars, the Pelicans' executive vice president of basketball operations. Back in Detroit from 2005 to 2009, Hervey worked directly under Dumars as a video coordinator. Dumars certainly is focused on adding staffers that he has a history with. Hervey is the second former Pistons front office member to join the Dumars administration, with former Detroit GM Troy Weaver already on board as the senior vice president of basketball operations. I think the question that this continues to raise around Dumars, and we will certainly see the results as we go forward, the debate is going to be about whether Joe Dumars is relying too much on familiarity rather than having some competition of voices. When you look at the front office David Griffin built, some of those names he was familiar with, certainly, but there were also some new people brought into the mix. People who either hadn't had front office experience or were new to his sphere. He did reach out beyond his own circle of influence. That has not been the case so far with Joe Dumars. And I think that where the concern comes in, again, we'll see what the results bear, but we have to address the concerns. The concern will be, is Dumars creating an echo chamber in his front office? And will there be enough competing voices to really get a dynamic, creative tension within the building? I'm a person who believes that you should have some competing voices, that there has to be somebody in the room who's on this. Everybody should be on the same path. We should all be wanting to go to the same place. But you also want to have some people around who see your vision just a bit differently, who maybe see a different path to get to the same result, so that there is that ability to say, I understand, but here's what I see. And are we going to get that in the Pelicans front office? I think the other concern, if you're Bryson Graham, is where your role continues to evolve. You've been given this position of general manager with the Pelicans, and you've done a good job in going from an intern to the front office. You have a lot of institutional knowledge. You've had a lot of contributions as far as acquiring talent. And now you're bringing in somebody who's done both game planning and has been on the talent side and evaluating players. That was Troy Weaver's claim to fame when he came into the Pelicans front office. So if you've got these 3 people now, that's on the positive side, that's a lot of people with experience in acquiring talent. And that is something that the Pelicans have to do. They need better basketball players. They need more talented basketball players. They need basketball players with high IQs. The more people you have identifying those potential players, I think that's a good thing. You want a broader and more expansive front office. The question becomes, how does the power dynamic start to work? If you're Bryson Graham, do you start to feel like you're getting squeezed out? What assurances have been made that your voice is still going to be heard? And now these 2 folks who have known Dumars longer, who clearly he has more familiarity with, what does that mean for Bryson Graham's future? That remains to be seen. The good thing, though, is we are starting to see more and more of this front office take shape, and it looks like the early emphasis in having somebody whose experience is on, and Troy Weaver has been on, acquiring young talent and identifying young players. And then with Jason Hervey, you look at him and being somebody who's gone from tape analysis and game planning and also player acquisition. This is all to supplement that brain trust and make the Pelicans a little bit better in identifying those players as we get into this draft season and then the ultimate reshaping of this roster for years to come. So I think ultimately in the short term, we'll say this is a good hire with concerns, and we'll see what happens going forward with the Pelicans. But the big news as far as talent acquisition has to be the rumors that have been floating around NBA circles lately that there could be a potential blockbuster deal that Joe Dumars and the Pelicans front office would be examining to bring Ja Morant to New Orleans to be reunited with his former AAU teammate, Zion Williamson. Some folks are going to roll their eyes immediately at the prospects of this and think it's fool's gold to even pursue it. Other people are already dreaming of seeing that duo in transition, which would be deadly and very entertaining to watch. But there's certainly pros and cons of the pairing of Ja Morant and Zion Williamson, who both came into the draft the same time, the top 2 picks in 2019. So let's start with the pros. First off, you're adding immense talent. Let's just start right there. Ja Morant is a top-tier point guard in the NBA when he's on the court. Explosive, fearless, is going to push the tempo, can do everything you want to see in the open court, can finish at the rim. Him and Zion running the floor together, I mean, that would be terrifying for opposing teams. Those two out in transition, they'd instantly become one of the most athletic. Like you're thinking Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. You're thinking Chris Paul and Blake Griffin. That type of connection in the half court or in transition. Just ultimate lobs, highlight reels. Just the possibilities there are endless. If you're the Pelicans front office and you're the ticket sales department, you're thinking about the marketing possibilities. You're thinking about the sales, jersey sales going through the roof. Ja Morant wearing a 12, where 12 has certainly become an iconic number when you talk about the New Orleans Pelicans. It could all be a very interesting prospect and an exciting prospect. Second, the Pelicans have been searching for a true point guard to lead their offense. Like going back through the history of this franchise, when it's performed its best, it's because it's had great play at the point guard position. Whether you're talking about Baron Davis, whether you're talking about Chris Paul, whether we're talking about Rajon Rondo, when this team was at its best, has been at its best, it's because it had a true lead guard who could command this team and put it in the right positions on offense and on the defensive end. So CJ McCollum is not that. He's a combo guard. He's a shooter. Jose Alvarado is a quality backup. He is not a true lead guard. Elfrid Payton, who I've gotten a lot of comments about and people saying you have Elfrid on the roster. Why are the Pelicans looking for more point guards? The problem with Elfrid Payton is while he's as gifted a passer as you're going to find, he can't do any of the other things you need out of a starting point guard. He can't shoot the basketball. He can't finish at the rim. He can't defend very well. He is a poor defender. So you can't go into games next season starting Elfrid Payton and expect you're going to win. You need a lead point guard. And DeJounte Murray is on the shelf for the foreseeable future. If Ja Morant is available, you are getting a playmaker who can elevate everybody on this roster, whether it's Zion Williamson, whether it's Trey Murphy, whomever you're pairing with Ja Morant on that court, they're going to be better because his ability to collapse defenses. And the problem for the Pelicans has been when Zion Williamson isn't on the floor, they haven't had somebody who could put their head down and get to the rim and open up possibilities for other people. The ball movement alone has not been enough to create enough quality shots for the New Orleans Pelicans. A player like Ja Morant collapsing defenses, his ability to create and his ability to finish. Because that part, even if with a healthy DeJounte Murray, his finishing ability last season, and folks could point to him breaking his hand in the opening game of the season, but that wasn't his shooting hand. That was his offhand. And he still wasn't able to finish. He still didn't shoot a high percentage. That should not have been the reason. Whatever it was, he just wasn't performing as well. Ja Morant, we know that he's not a great three-point shooter, but you're hoping for elite athleticism and elite penetration and finishing skills from two players can make those other three players have the ability to knock down shots from the perimeter and finish around the rim as well. Third, if Memphis is considering moving Ja, that means that they're going to sell him on the low. Like they have financial considerations. They have people who need contracts. There's frustration. There's a desire to rebuild in Memphis and make this thing work. Even though they've made the playoffs and they've been successful, they have not been able to get to that second tier. They've been a first round exit team and they have not been able to really reach what they think their potential is. So the Pelicans have an opportunity to acquire an elite talent at a low price, which is exactly the position teams are looking at the Pelicans when they think of acquiring Zion Williamson. So if you can add that type of player and buy low, then I think you have to try to do it, because you look, there are teams like the Rockets who are looking for a more dynamic backcourt mate to pair with some of their players. You look at the Miami Heat, are certainly looking to upgrade and add talent. The Orlando Magic, who need another spark in their backcourt, or the Sacramento Kings, who lost their point guard in De'Aaron Fox in that big trade last season. All of those teams are considered the potential landing spots for Ja Morant. If you're the Pelicans, you need to jump past those teams, because two of those are your direct competitors as you try to elevate in the West. If the Grizzlies are looking to make some changes, you can take advantage of their indecision right now. New coach, shaping that team around Jaren Jackson Jr., you might be able to take advantage of this and get a deal for a reasonable price. What are the negatives in trying to acquire Ja Morant? Well, certainly the first one that people are going to bring up are the off-court issues and his availability, his maturity. And Joe Dumars has talked a lot about the types of players that he wants to add to his franchise, the integrity that he wants to have them to have, and the work ethic that he wants them to have. Now, I don't think there's ever been a question about Ja Morant's work ethic. I don't think there's ever been a question about his desire to compete. I think the questions are about his maturity, whether it's the on-court signs and stuff that he's gotten suspensions for, the pointing of the guns, the finger guns, and then the hand grenade gesture, which I don't think were really, in the grand scheme of things, they are not significant issues. I think that they are things that the NBA is doing to antagonize and just try to make an example of Ja because of previous situations. The things with the guns and whatnot. I don't believe Ja Morant is a tough guy. The problem with that is when you pretend to be a tough guy, you sometimes end up in tough guy situations and you can't fake your way through it. But if you get him out of that situation, if you give him a change of pace, the same thing you're hoping that some people are hoping with Zion Williamson, and if you change his situation, that maybe he'll mature, are you willing to take that bet? The Pelicans want to build a strong culture, and they don't want to add players who could disrupt that. But I think the concern is only amplified if you don't have the right coach. Now, that depends on what your perception, again, of what Joe Dumars and Willie Green want to do as far as leading this team. If Joe Dumars wants a stronger person in charge, and I think that's what you kind of need here, is a veteran. Look who Ja's been coached by in the NBA. Taylor Jenkins was a first-time coach, and though he had a lot of success, maybe that, when you're focused on that type of situation, when you're just learning how to be a head coach, maybe that's not the best situation when you're trying to also be the leader of a young man who's learning his way as a professional, who's just been given tens of millions of dollars, a lot of fame, and doesn't know how to deal with it. That's part of this process. That's part of teaching people how to be a professional. It's not just teaching them how to practice and show up for 82 games and all those things. It's how do you handle this lifestyle of being an NBA player? The other part, of course, is Ja's injuries. He's missed a lot of time over the last several years due to his injuries. You already have concerns with Zion Williamson. Adding another star with plenty of availability issues could be quite risky and something that you don't want to do again. So there's a risk-reward option there of betting that Ja is going to be healthier in the future than he has been in the past. I think, obviously, the comparison for Ja Morant for a lot of people is going to be Allen Iverson. That very slender, super quick, super athletic guard, and you wonder, how does his game age when the weight of those injuries starts adding up as he gets older? I don't think that you want to worry about that if you're going to acquire him. I think that if you're doing this move, again, these are short-term, high-gain propositions. If you're bringing in Ja to pair with Zion in the short term, based on, and we'll talk about the assets you could potentially give up, if that's the move you're making a win now move. You're trying to win a championship within a 3 to 4 year window. So you're not betting on Ja at 35 years old. What you're betting on is the Ja that you get from 24, 25 to 28, 29. If that's what you're betting on, I think you're trying to get the peak of his physical abilities before he starts to slow down, before things start to become a little bit more difficult. Because I think what we saw with guys like Iverson, or guys who rely so much in athleticism, undersized guards who rely so much on athleticism, it's about a 10 to 12 year career. And I think that's the same thing you proposed for Zion Williamson when he came in the league. I don't think anybody expected Zion to be the kind of player who you're looking at as a LeBron type career, looking at year 18, 19, 20. These are comets. When you get the freak athletically type of player, their peak, it comes and it goes very rapidly. You can experience a lot of success and you have to take advantage of it while it's there. And I think that's, if you're the Pelicans, you have to think about it that way and make moves in that regard. We are trying to win today. We are in the asset acquisition business to get talent around these two guys and win a championship as quickly as possible. Are you potentially mortgaging your future? You'd have to see that in moves to come. But I think you can make this move, this one individual move, without mortgaging the Pelicans' future. So what would the cost be in giving up assets to acquire somebody like Ja Morant? The Pelicans would have to obviously give up some player talent, some draft picks to get it done. Well, Bleacher Report put together a proposal. And in that pick, in their proposal, the Pelicans would give up DeJounte Murray, Herb Jones, and next year's top 4 protected first rounder from the Indiana Pacers. I think that's an extremely fair price for someone with Ja Morant's ability and what he could do potentially for the New Orleans Pelicans. DeJounte Murray, you may have already, and we talked about this in the last episode, so you can go back and check that one out. You may have already gotten the best you're going to get out of DeJounte Murray. As bad as last year was for him, that may be the best you get of him in a Pelicans uniform. Considering that Achilles injury, he's already had a knee injury in his career as well. DeJounte is also one of these slight, hyper-athletic guards, right? Not known as a great shooter, right? So you're getting a similar player to the one you acquired last year, who's also got his own injury concerns, but I think also brings some different skill sets to the table. Losing Herb Jones, you don't want to part with Herb Jones. I understand that there's a heavy contingent of folks who love Herb, and nobody dislikes Herb. Everybody values Herb in different ways, certainly some more than others. But if that's the price of doing business, one first round pick that's already top 4 protected, Herb Jones, who, you've gotten good years out of, but potentially, hey, if that's the sacrifice, and DeJounte Murray, a guy who played less than 50 games for you, I think that's a price that you could be willing to pay. You retain this year's pick and you eliminate a player who doesn't seem to really fit your future in New Orleans, because by the time you get a healthy DeJounte Murray, are you unable to unload that contract to somebody else? Is he desirable as an asset for someone else? Let's say you don't get rid of DeJounte Murray. And let's talk about this. The Pelicans are still going to have problems at the point guard position. Okay, we've talked about his DeJounte's injury recovery. Let's say he gets back in January, February next year, and he's ready to go. Depending on where the Pelicans season are, you have a couple of options. If you're going into next season and you're losing in January, February, you're approaching the trade deadline, you're still trying to get rid of DeJounte Murray, right? You're trying to unload salary. If you're a losing team at next year's trade deadline, you're trying to get rid of players and you're trying to start this thing over, because now you've really exhausted your possibilities. If you're winning, if you figured this out, whatever moves the Pelicans make this offseason, and they're a winning and contention team, then you start thinking about, does adding DeJounte Murray to the mix enhance us? Because clearly you figured out your point guard position if you're in a winning team by January next year. Does he make us better? Or does fitting him back into the rotation and trying to find a place for him become a problem for whomever the coach is, for whomever that rotation is? Those are real things to be concerned about. And then you look at the rest of that point guard position, as we talked about, whether it's a Jose Alvarado who is limited both in his stature, his ability, and his effectiveness over the long haul. You cannot start Jose Alvarado at point guard for 45 to 50 games and expect to be a contender in the NBA. Not when you look at the other point guards that you're going to face on a night-to-night basis. And that's no disrespect to Jose. It's just simply some people are starters and some people are reserves. We all have roles to play. Elfrid Payton, is that going to get you to the promised land? You're not going to move over CJ McCollum to that point guard spot and have it. This is the main complaint that Pelicans fans have with him, is that he dribbles the ball too much He does not create great opportunities for other folks. So why are you trying to have more of that? Antonio Reeves is not a point guard. None of these guys are point guards. And we've already talked about the leadership of this team. The history of this franchise has always come down to great point guard leadership. Rajon Rondo wasn't even at his peak anymore when he came in and influenced and changed the entire direction of that team after DeMarcus Cousins went down. You got the best of Rondo after DeMarcus Cousins went down because the ball was in his hands and you had a veteran making those decisions. That's not the type of player that a Ja Morant is, of course. But if you're this is why when we talk about the draft, why so many folks have the Pelicans focusing on if they get that second pick. Cooper Flag out of the picture at 1. But at that second pick, the reason why Dylan Harper is often seen as so much of a focus for the Pelicans is because they need a lead decision maker in the backcourt, and they just don't have that. No one can step up and fill that void in the absence of DeJounte Murray. No one on this roster. A game or two, sure. But for significant minutes from the outset of the season and trying to create a winning culture in a season where you absolutely have to have some kind of success, when your fan base is hanging on by a thread, when you have players who have to start considering their futures as well. If you're a Trey Murphy, does another losing season push you closer to asking to leave New Orleans? If you do retain Herb Jones, does another losing season push him another step to being traded? And if so, if you're going to be going that direction anyway, if everybody's going to go, then blow it up now. But the Pelicans need to find a point guard. They need to find a leader. Yes, they have other holes. The center position is one, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the Pelicans have to find an on-court leader. By personality, that's not Zion Williamson, even if he's handling the ball. By personality, it could be Trey Murphy, but he's not going to be your primary ball handler. That's not going to be Herb Jones. The person who's going to lead this team on the court has to be the one who's got the ball in their hand the most. And on the current roster, that person just doesn't exist. DeJounte Murray can't do that from rehab. And even when he was leading the team, where was it going? There's a reason that the Spurs felt it was okay to move on from him. There's a reason that the Hawks were okay with moving on from him. There are limitations. And now with these injuries, there are even more. So I think, yes, the Pelicans have to really and seriously consider improving the point guard position. Now, the other part of that, the other big concern is in the front court. The team has a lot of needs in the front court. You went into last season with center being the major concern. All you had was Daniel Tice and rookie Yves Missi at the start of the season. You never really solved it. You tried Mo Bamba. You tried other players. Nothing really materialized. What you have on the roster now is a bunch of non-centers and Yves Missi, because Carlo Makovich is not a center. He's a 4. He can't protect the rim. He doesn't provide that type of deterrent in the paint. He's not a dominant player on the offensive glass for you, where at least at the center position, that is one commonality the Pelicans have had in the center position since Zion Williamson got here, is everyone who's manned that position really as a starter has been dominant on the offensive glass, whether you're talking about Steven Adams, whether you're talking about Derek Favors, whether you're talking about Jonas Valanciunas, or whether you're talking about Yves Missi. All of them have been quality offensive rebounders. That's not Carlo's thing. That's not Kelly Olynyk's thing. None of those guys are shot blockers either. None of those guys are going to give you the kind of power that you need in the front court. None of those guys are the athletic enough finishers in that dunker spot to make you feel comfortable in leaving those guys there opposite Zion Williamson. And outside of Carlo, they haven't really shown the consistent ability. We'll give Kelly Olynyk as well, who's a decent three-point shooter throughout his career. But of the younger players, Carlo and Yves, Carlo has shown some ability, very good ability in the corner to shoot the three, but not an above-the-break three-point shooter yet. So who could the Pelicans target in free agency to fill that center role? Because if you're drafting in the top 4, you're not taking a center. There's no center available in the top 4 for the Pelicans take. If you fall back, we can get into that next week about some of the center options there, and we'll do that. But certainly in free agency, there are a lot of options available for this franchise to get a significant upgrade. It's going to need other moves based on the contracts and the cap situation. But the first name at the top of the list is a guy that Pelicans fans have been talking about for years, and that's Miles Turner from the Pacers. What do you get from him? You get his experience. He's a veteran. You get his shooting. He shot it very well, especially in these playoffs. He's gotten back to shooting the basketball pretty well. He can block shots. He's been among the league shot blockers for years at this stage, and he's coming off a very reasonable contract with the Pacers. Got paid, I think, about 19 million. Yeah, almost 20 million this season. And he's made a lot of money. He's playing well. He could be a good fit. He is not a dominant rebounder. That's the thing you worry about with Miles Turner. He's never been an elite rebounder, but this is a guy who shoots it at around a 40% clip from 3, and he's going to give you 2 block shots every night. So certainly fans love him. Of course, the other guy that people have talked about a lot is Naz Reid, who will be a free agent as well. The concern, of course, is that the Timberwolves would do whatever they have to do to keep him in Minnesota, especially with Julius Randle going into free agency. They may prioritize Naz Reid as the younger version of a player that they want to keep rather than keeping Julius Randle. I think certainly that a lot of that will be determined by how well Julius Randle plays in the rest of these playoffs. He's adapted well, but you're talking about a Naz Reid who's coming off a contract that pays him $14 million this year. Folks are going to be excited about him. He has the ability to put the ball on the floor with the dribble. He can finish around the rim. He's gotten bigger and stronger since he's gotten in the NBA. He's already very strong coming in. And again, another guy who's going to shoot the 3-pointer at a high clip. He can start. He can come off the bench. He's won the 6-man award before. He gives you that flexibility based on matchups that you can pair him in a double big lineup with Yves Missi. And you could play a front court of Zion, Naz Reid, and Missi and feel very comfortable. Or you can play him as your center and have Zion at the 4 and still feel comfortable. Other names that I think the Pelicans would have to look at: Brook Lopez, getting older, but his skill set is still paying good dividends. Last season, shot it above 50% from the floor again, shot above 37% from 3, and still blocked almost 2 shots a game for the Milwaukee Bucks as they continue to decrease his minutes. The question is, at this stage in his career, does Brook Lopez want to play for a non-contending team? You'd have to probably overpay to get a veteran at his stage, where he might take less for a championship contending team to play a role on a winner. So that's where you worry about in trying to acquire somebody like Brook Lopez. Do you go back after somebody like Mark Williams with the Charlotte Hornets, who they tried to trade to the Los Angeles Lakers last season? He failed his physical, but the way he closed the season over those final 21 games, he looked like he was evolving as a player, averaging around 15 points, 8 rebounds a game, I believe, down the stretch for the Hornets. Started to figure it out, shooting a much higher percentage. His physicality is there. He's an imposing figure at the center spot and a very interesting target. Another guy, aging, but still gives you as a reserve. I don't think you'd want to start him at this stage in his career, but Clint Capella, who maybe the Pelicans should have fought a little bit harder for in that trade to get back from Atlanta. A good finisher, certainly in pick and rolls. He's experienced in that. Somebody you can use there. A shot blocker for sure. A good rebounder on both ends of the floor. He can do those things. Not able to shoot the 3. That's not what you're going to get from Clint Capella. But as a backup power big, somebody who gives you an imposing figure in the paint, then that's somebody that the Pelicans could consider. A couple of, Domantas Sabonis is somebody that people have talked about, though that would have to be a trade acquisition. Free agency, the other guys who I think, you kind of lump together as they are backup alternatives if you can't make a higher tier move. People like a Mo Wagner, who probably his first inclination would be to stay in Orlando. The Magic have a team option on him. I think that they would likely exercise that to continue to pair him with his brother. But he's a guy who could play the 5, the 4, or the 3, depending on the lineup configuration. He's a guy who knows how to score the ball very well. Not a great rebounder as far as it goes, but more of an offensive threat at the center position. The same is what you would say for somebody like the rest of the guys on the list are much more as far as just doing the dirty work. If you wanted to grab guys who can do the rebounding, shot blocking, and fill in that role of just being the more imposing and having to go identify that scoring center option somewhere else and maybe through the draft. You talk about guys like Luke Cornett, who's done a very good job for the Boston Celtics, who's coming off a $2.8 million salary with the Celtics this season. The Celtics may not be able to afford him that incredible amount of salary that they have on their cap. Precious Achiuwa with the New York Knicks, a guy who came from Toronto, ends up with the Knicks. Again, not a lot of height, but he is a strong big man who can defend multiple positions, can protect the rim, does not shoot it great from 3, but is a very good finisher. Much more of a defensive target at the center spot. Kevon Looney with the Golden State Warriors. Again, with their salary cap, they may not be able to retain a guy who's who's spent his whole career in Golden State, has won multiple championships, does his job without complaint, and gives you all of the little things that you want from your center. He will do all of that work. He will rebound. He will set great screens for you. He can knock down shots in the mid-range, from that baseline. You do a screen and roll, he pops to that 15-foot spot. He can knock down that shot. He will finish around the basket. He can make his free throws. Another guy who I have liked for a number of years as a backup, not as a solution, but as a backup is Thomas Bryant. A lot of physicality again, can block shots, can shoot the 3, has been about a 33% shooter, sometimes more from 3-point range over the last couple of years, can block some shots, gives you some athleticism, and has played with winning teams in Indiana now. And has played with the Lakers, has played in big markets, and has played in bad situations, and has still continued to develop his career. Each one of those players, could bring something to the Pelicans, but primarily you have your big targets in Turner and Reed, and maybe a Sabonis via trade. But in free agency, it's Turner and Reed are your 2 top choices. If neither of those is available, then I think you do take a shot at some of these lower cost options because they're not bad, and you've got to have something. They've got to get taller. And Joe Dumars has said, look, this is where the league is going. And it's clear. Look, you are in a division with a lot of height. You are in a conference with a lot of height. There are a lot of bigs who are able to score and stretch the defense and terrorize you on the boards. And there were just too many nights last season where the Pelicans looked like a college team standing next to a lot of NBA teams. The only way to address that is by getting height in that front court. And there are reasonable options. Yeah, all of them are going to make you feel like the Pelicans are headed to the championship, but it starts with something, and it can't be another Daniel Tice acquisition. It can't be another 6'8" center coming to the table. You've got to get youth, you've got to get strength, you've got to get athleticism, you've got to get rim protection, all of those things as much as you can from your center position. And even if that means, again, if you have to ship out a Kelly Olynyk to give him another chance with a contender in order to create some space, in order to acquire centers that more directly impact your roster, who are going to be better defenders, who are going to be better rebounders, who are going to be better shot blockers, then I think that's what you have to do. Because you cannot beat the Houston Rockets without an interior presence. You cannot beat the Oklahoma City Thunder without a legitimate interior presence. You're not going to get to the upper echelon of the Western Conference if you cannot match their length and athleticism in the front court. I want y'all to go ahead and let me know in the comment section below, who should the Pelicans prioritize at the center position? Who do you think could reshape the team a bit and raise their ceiling, or at least raise their floor? Because that's the start. When you've been as bad as the Pelicans were last year, you've at least got to raise your floor. And do any of these players do that for you? I think a couple of them do. It's just that so many of these moves hinge on what happens in the draft and with the lottery. It's almost like the Pelicans are kind of stuck in a bit of a stasis, even if they wanted to make some decisions. Certainly the playoffs and things are all going to change player availability and things like that as well. But it seems like you can't really formulate your plan. And I would guess if you're Joe Dumars, you're already working on plans A, B, and C based on where you fall in the lottery. But you can't take your actions until you actually find out what's going on. And that's just a few days away. We're just 4 days away from finding out where the Pelicans are going to be in the draft lottery and maybe really understanding what the direction of this franchise is going to be. It's exciting, but it's also a bit fear-inducing too, because I think people are trying really not to get their hopes up. And that's a tough place to be for a fan base, where you feel like you've been burned by your optimism in the past. To be looking at the lottery and being like, man, anything below 2 is a failure. And I don't know if that's the case. And, last night, Wednesday night, let me say it that way. Wednesday night, we had a show on what if the Pelicans earn the number 1 pick and what if they don't. And I think that there's a lot of thought that if they don't get that top 2 spot, that they should go ahead and immediately trade the pick. And I don't think that that's the case. And I'm not saying that the opinion to do so isn't valid. It is, because I think there are options to doing that. But I don't think it's an immediate case of let's trade that pick. While I don't think that there are a lot of transformational players in this draft, as far as ones who are going to come in and make your franchise immediately feel like it's on the path to a championship, there are several players who can make your team better. It's just identifying and understanding what it's going to take to put them in their roles so that they can succeed. And I think another part of the trepidation comes from the coaching situation. Do Pelicans fans feel confident that if you put a young player in the hands of this team that they're going to develop? And I think, again, recent history says, I don't know how confident I can be. But I think we have to do 2 things here. We have to give Joe Dumars a reasonable chance. I mean, you just have to. Otherwise, then what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like, then there's no point to even, we could just shut it all down, turn off the lights in the studio, and it's not do this, because if we're not even going to allow for the possibility that change is there, then why play these games at all? You're not really interested anymore. I'm not interested anymore. If there's no chance that the situation can improve. So we've got to allow for that possibility to be there. The other part is I think you need to get some type of clarity as to what this organization is going to be. And I think that's going to be the buzzword for the next several months is, what are we? Clarity is going to be more than anything like, what direction are we going in? And until this Zion question gets solved, until this draft pick question gets solved, we're just not going to feel good about it. It feels like if these kinds of rumors, if the Ja Morant rumor is out there, it feels like there's still a debate going on in the front office as to whether or not to keep Zion. My guess is that they're leaning towards keeping Zion. And the reason I say that is because his contract is still so much in the Pelicans' favor. You have this player under your control for a reasonable amount of money with ways to get out of paying him guarantees. To have that is really a golden ticket. And to give up on that too soon without making sure that you've gotten every bit of value out of that ticket, I think Joe Dumars doesn't want to do that. I think he understands at least that much. Now, I could be wrong. And today is not the day to grade any of this. But by Monday night, we're going to have a much better sense of where this organization is headed. So again, let me remind you to check in with us. Have a great weekend. Do all you can. Have a great weekend out there. Enjoy Mother's Day. Enjoy the city and all those things. But on Monday, is back to business in a big way for the New Orleans Pelicans. All right, that's going to be today's show. Make sure you give me your thoughts on what we've talked about here today, on the players, on the trades. Do you like a Ja Morant to New Orleans trade? Do you like any of those centers that we talked about? Is point guard a priority for you? Let me know. Hit me in the comments below. Make sure you share it with the other Pelicans fans as well. But we will be back again soon this weekend. I'm going to have something for you, a little draft lottery preview for you. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Be on the lookout for that. Follow me on social media at DM Grubb on Twitter or X. I still can't ever get to say that. I'm old. Come on, guys. Give me some forgiveness here. Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok. You can find me in all those places. Until then, this has been the Post Up with David Grubb. That's me right here on Boot Crew Media. Y'all have a great weekend.